It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Eid Mubarak to all the faithful Muslims of the world. The day when the month-long fast of Ramadan comes to an end. A very happy day for Muslims, unless, of course, those Muslims are in Gaza. And a happy Mother's Day. Only the mothers really care about the future because they give birth to the future with their babies. Of course, one hopes it was a happy Mother's Day for you, but again, it wasn't if you were in Gaza. Today, more mothers and more children were slaughtered just for the celebration of Eid and Mother's Day. And of course, it could be even worse. You could be in Yemen, the poorest country in the world, being destroyed every night by the richest country in the world. And Tulsi Gabbard says he's the peace president. Well, not if you're living under the bombs that are falling in Yemen, and definitely not if you are living in Iran, where the bombs are about to fall. You've come to the right place to discuss these and all other matters. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Of course, it's only the Eid today if you follow the diktat of Saudi Arabia, which those close to me definitely do. The Saudis cannot see the genocide in Gaza, even though it's only 800 miles away from them, but they definitely were able to glimpse the moon before everybody else, though that is 233,000 miles away. They saw it first. And of course, for those of you celebrating Eid tomorrow, instead, my salutations and my greetings go out to you all the same. It is Mother's Day only in the West, which is why I'm wishing A happy Mother's Day to every mother in the West, to my own mother, to the mothers of my children, to your mother, and to mothers all over the world. And the quote from Mayakovsky that I gave earlier is a very profound one. Only mothers really do have the investment for the future because they carry it around inside themselves for 9 months. They have the labor of giving it birth. And so for them, the future is even more significant than for the rest of us. The Green Party launched a meme today in which they wished a happy day to all those with a motherhood role. Some people will do anything other than talk about mothers. Some of them will talk about anything other than women because they cannot agree on the very definition of a woman. But we can here at the mother of all talk shows. So happy Mother's Day to all those women who give birth. And that's, of course, most of them. With all sympathy and respect to those unable to do so, either through opportunity or through some other difficulty, the fact that mothers are the most important people on the planet also ought to be a commonplace. It ought to be common wisdom. It's the reason why, surely, that we cherish and honor women quite the way we are supposed to do. It's the reason why it's women and children first. It's the reason why we lament the death of women and their children, even more than we lament the unnecessary and, in many cases, violent deaths of other people. I'm laboring this point because I'm feeling it very keenly today. I watched the funerals this morning. Imagine having in the depredations of the refugee camps, concentration camps, death camps of Gaza, surviving all of Ramadan, fasting from dawn until dusk, unable to find clean water to break your fast, unable oftentimes to find even a crust with which to break your fast. Imagine your children being murdered in front of your eyes, your wife, your mother being murdered in front of your eyes today, this day, the Eid day. Now, religious people believe that those who die during Ramadan and during the Eid will be guaranteed a place in heaven. Personally, I very much hope that that is the case, but none of us can really know. It's a matter of faith. It's a matter of belief. And people of all religions have faith and have belief. It's not only Muslims that believe in God, though Muslims seem to practice their religion with a great deal more vivacity, a great deal more verve than the rest of us are able to muster. New statistics just today show that not even 2% of people in the so-called Western world who call themselves Christians ever go to church except for weddings and funerals. Less than 2%. Whereas all over the world, particularly in Muslim countries, but all over the world, Islam and its adherents demonstrate, at least. To God, they hope, but to the rest of us, they surely do, their fidelity to their faith. I'm laboring that point because I'm addressing these next remarks to the leaders of what we call the Muslim world. I'm wondering how you're not able to see what the rest of us are seeing. And if you can see it, I'm wondering why you cannot do anything at all about it. And if you cannot do anything at all about it, I'm wondering how you think God is going to accept your fast. I'm wondering how you think on the judgment day the fact that you fasted Ramadan 2025 is going to be sufficient to pass muster with the Lord when during Ramadan 2025 you did nothing at all to come to the rescue of your co-religionists who were fasting alongside you. Indeed, you watched them die. If you've got a telephone, if you've got a television, if you've got a computer, you watched them die, or you deliberately turned away so that you would not have to watch them die. Gaza is the most obvious example, but surely the Yemen is too. Why are people being murdered on this Eid day in Yemen? Because they tried to do something to come to the aid of the starving, the thirsty, and the massacred in the Gaza Strip. Indeed, were the only Arab country, only one, who tried to do anything at all to bring the suffering of fellow Arabs, fellow Muslims, to an end in the Gaza Strip. There is no other reason why the Yemenis are being murdered by Donald Trump, the peace president, according to Tulsi Gabbard, not 2 hours ago. The people in Yemen are being killed only because their armed forces tried to enforce an armed picket line in the Red Sea to disrupt ships going not to London, not to San Francisco, not to New York, but to disrupt ships going to and from Israel, which is carrying out the genocide which all of us are again watching. And nobody even says anything about it. Never mind does anything. Now, many of you are watching this and are saying now, I know you are, because you say it to me, what about the West? Indeed, what about the West? And I, believe me, am coming to them. But what about the East first and foremost? The West are not Arabs. The West are not Muslims. The West are not hoping that God will allow them into paradise as a result of passing muster on the judgment day. All of these things are gone, dead, buried in unmarked graves, unconsecrated ground in Western societies. Western societies are godless societies. So the issue of doing what God would ask you to do, what Jesus, if he were here, would be showing you what to do, are null and void, because nobody in the British government, nobody in the American government gives a damn about God. Of course, they'll lay on hands, they'll even speak in tongues. They'll wear their Christianity on their sleeve, but it's only on their sleeve. It is not in their hearts. Anybody who seriously asks where Jesus would stand on the slaughter, on his land, in the village in which he was born, in the town, Jerusalem, in which he was excoriated, tortured, and crucified. Anybody who asks, where would Jesus stand on what's happening in Palestine, it really has to be joking. How can you know the gospel? How can you know the life of Jesus? How can you know how he kicked over the tables of the money changers? How he lashed with a whip the usurers, the exploiters, and who it was who chanted, Crucify him, crucify him. When Pontius Pilate, the imperial occupier, asked the mass, what shall I do with this troublesome priest? So the West does nothing, but then scorpions sting because they're scorpions. I'm asking you, the rulers of these Arab countries next door, how you can, never mind sleep at night, I know that you do, because you fill yourselves with the things that help you to sleep. I'm asking how you think you fooled God by your apparent fidelity, when if God is real, he already knows that you are false. Now, the big enchilada seems to be sailing ever closer. We are told by Donald Trump in what I took to be, well, a vaguely obscene metaphor, though it may just be my dirty mind, when he said we're getting to the final strokes with Iran. I took it to mean that he was about to come with his high explosives, perhaps even his nuclear high explosives. And if that's true, if he's not just bluffing, then of course it renders everything I've just been talking about otiose, redundant. There will be no Palestine question. There will be no FA Cup final. There will be no Champions League highlights to watch. There will be no children to enjoy. There will be no wives to love. There will be no grass newly mown to smell. There will be no life anywhere on our planet. We will all be dead, either immediately or in the ensuing nuclear winter. You think I'm exaggerating? Then you haven't read what happens when nuclear weapons begin to fly. And we're told by, amongst others, scottritter, that the American armed forces have tailor-made nuclear devices that are designed only for the busting of bunkers and underground cities in which Iran holds its ballistic missile inventory. But of course, the use of nuclear weapons in Iran means the use of nuclear weapons in Saudi Arabia. It means the use of nuclear weapons in Mecca, in Medina. It means the use of nuclear weapons in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. It means the use of nuclear weapons, yes, Mr. Al Jazeera, in Qatar, because nuclear weapons don't respect lines, artificial lines at that, drawn on desert sands, or rather on the maps of desert sands. The nuclear fallout will be everywhere, even if Iran does not have its own nuclear weapon to fire in return. Now, I got a lot of stick. Some people say I'll get arrested. Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Better be hung for a sheep than a lamb. The Iranians would be idiots if they have not now got themselves a nuclear weapon. When nuclear armed powers, half a dozen of them, are threatening you with their nuclear weapons, it becomes more than a self-denying ordinance to deny yourself that which technologically you could have. And if you had, it would be a deterrent. Because that's what nuclear weapons are, isn't it? They are deterrents. At least that's what we were always told here in Britain. We're told we must spend tens of billions of public money to have nuclear weapons, not because we're going to use them, but because we are a deterrent against the attack from others. Well, if that's true for Britain, how can it not be true for Iran? If that's the real purpose of holding nuclear weapons, so that no one will attack you, why should any country which could have nuclear weapons not have them? In this, I so profoundly disagree with my friend Scottritter, who is taking the realpolitik approach, cold, analytical, and no doubt scientific, and definitely for a good reason. He is trying to stop an American attack on Iran, and I respect him for it. But he's trying to persuade us, and presumably them, that the only way to avoid an attack with nuclear weapons from the United States is to capitulate to the self-evident hypocrisy and double standards, which allows America to have thousands of nuclear weapons, but denies Iran the right to have one, which allows Israel illegally to hold hundreds of nuclear weapons, but denies the right of Iran to have one. More, which says Iran must allow itself to be attacked by nuclear weapons states, and that if it does not, somehow it is to blame. Now, as a father of 6, all of them young, 5 of the 6 of them young children, and the last man in the world that wants to see the world go up in nuclear smoke. But if I was in Iran, I'd be saying this to Donald Trump. You know, bullies will go to hell. Those that stand up to bullies will surely, if there's a heaven, be destined for there. And so do your worst, President Trump. Eventually, somebody has to stand up to the bully. And that somebody might as well be we who believe. I told you, it's the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned for the rest. And
there's a group of people in Twitter who are daily posting discussions about Gaza, Lebanon, what's happening, news updates, aid for Gaza, and trying to enlist the help of Jordan and France and any other regional entity that will help get more aid into Gaza and all of Gaza, all of Palestine, for everyone who suffers. So I want to request that everyone who is listening to this go to your local council meetings and peacefully request that their representatives at the local levels do this, because it works.
thanks for the call, Pia, in Uruguay. I'm a free man of the city of San Francisco, awarded to me for my work on Palestine, on the steps of City Hall itself. So it was a particular delight for me that the San Francisco Council voted by 8 votes to 3 to demand a ceasefire. And that decision didn't come out of nowhere. It came out of campaigning to force the local authority representatives to vote.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is the US beyond international law? Asks the poll this evening. Yes or no? Is the US beyond international law? Almost 20,000 people have voted already. And it looks actually quite overwhelmingly that people do think the US is beyond international law. So you can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, formerly Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. And if you are watching on the YouTube stream, make sure that you subscribe, please, to my YouTube channel and give the show a big thumbs up while you're at it. And tell all your friends on YouTube that we are live right now. The telephone number to call the show is toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 00 442 966 2625. Jessica Burbank is a correspondent for Dropsite News and co-host of Jess and John Pod. She is a rising star of the internet, and you're lucky you get to see her now here on the mother of all talk shows. Jessica, welcome to the show. The first time we've met, and I'm very glad to make your acquaintance. I've been dilating at some length for the last 20 minutes on the possibility, some would say probability, that all-out war is about to break out in the Persian Gulf. Not just between the US, the UK, and the coalition of the willing against the Islamic Republic of Iran, but of course, by extension, with the close allies, including treaty allies of Iran, Russia, and China. Did we dodge a bullet in the Ukraine, only to see it even more deadly in the Persian Gulf? What's your take on that?
Thanks for having me on, Mr. Galloway. Yeah, I think in the United States, everyone is so distracted that the conversation about the United States bombing the Houthi rebels on Signal was leaked. We're distracted with the fanfare of that whole ordeal. But I do think tensions are rising. We've seen documents leaked, reported by Ken Klippenstein, that the United States is considering war with Iran. It's this big idea. And it would be a grave mistake, because this is a country that's been around and measures politics in centuries. The United States is such a new, baby, naive nation compared to what Iran is. It truly is a giant. And this idea that it's a good idea to show your strength by escalating in terms of violence, I think is an outdated concept, but our leaders are just so small-minded that, you know, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Trump in this administration.
Well, they say that it's about Iran's nuclear program, but Iran and the United States had a nuclear treaty. The JPCOA had worked perfectly well. The people who are supposed to police the nuclear program of Iran or other countries, the IAEA, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, unless, like Israel, you haven't signed either and won't allow either in, but for other countries with nuclear programs, the IAEA is the policeman. And they never reported that Iran was in any way in breach of its obligations under the nuclear treaty that Donald Trump withdrew from. So does nobody even remember that in the US, that there used to be a treaty, a nuclear treaty between Iran and the US governing this very subject that you say you're now going to war over?
Right. Yeah, our leaders rely on the very short memory of the American public. Same thing. Trump is pitching tariffs, and everyone's seemingly forgotten the trade war that sacrificed the farming industry in the United States, especially when it came to soybeans in 2018 when Trump was in office as well. So this this short memory that we have is what the United States has relied on for years and years of intervention. And we saw J.D. Vance, the vice president, talk about the trade that's depended on by coming through the Suez Canal. And so it's always about commerce. It's always about power. It's always about controlling international capital. And to do that, the United States has mandated that they play by a different set of rules than they assign to every other country. When I was a graduate student, I got to work under Stephenkinzer, who writes a lot about international affairs and U.S. intervention abroad, and he starts the course by filling his mouth with food. And through a full mouth of food says to the entire class, don't eat in this classroom. That's one of the rules of this course. I'm allowed to eat in the classroom, of course, but you don't eat. It's very distracting. And he says, I'm the United States. And it's such a good metaphor. And it's the first time a lot of these American students really have a mirror as to how we're viewed in the rest of the world. It couldn't be more true what you're saying, that we expect our public to be convinced by the argument we have nuclear weapons as a deterrent, but any other nation that has them intends to use them for harm. And we just accept this. We have a baked-in hypocrisy that we're propagandized to have in the United States. It's how we're taught.
You're making me hungry with your professor's metaphor, wonderful though it is. Actually, J.D. Vance is the only man, and only partly, who comes out of Signalgate with any credit at all, any honor at all. He, from the campaign trail, messages that I think you're making a mistake attacking Yemen. There's only 2 to 3% of the traffic for the United States that passes through the Red Sea. He didn't add, but he might well have, you're doing this for somebody else, not for the Americans. You're doing this for a different country, another country. And that is the long and the short of it, isn't it? If we go to war with Iran, we're not doing it for our own interests, quite the contrary. But we are doing it for Israel's interest, aren't we?
I would say so. Yeah, a lot of what the United States has been doing lately has been in the interest of Israel. And it's fascinating how the same group of interesting right-wing populists in America that voted Trump into office hold such contempt for the aid that the United States has sent to Ukraine, but are seemingly fine with Israel. And I think it's because this constituency is Christian evangelists who believe this understanding of Genesis 12:3, that it's meant to be those who bless Israel will be blessed. We've had members of Congress entering the Capitol building questioned about this belief on Israel, and it's a deeply religious belief that we are in a holy war and we have to protect Israel for religious reasons. Similarly, when we see the news about terrorists in the Middle East and, they're Islamic religious extremists, we think of that as the worst possible thing. When we have religious extremism really dictating a lot of our foreign policy in the U.S. today. And so, again, it's this hypocrisy. How can these two things be true in the same mind? And they are. We're just judging the rest of the world by entirely different criteria. And I think the religious motivations are why they're able to convince the public we're giving so many resources to Israel while 40% of Americans can't pay their monthly bills.
Yeah, they love the Old Testament. The New Testament, not quite as much. Let's talk about the tariffs that you referred to. You've been sounding off very eloquently about this matter. It's like almost, Trump seems to me almost like a child. I mean, I don't know if you have children, I have many. And they go through phases and they get a word or an idea, which is their a-day fix for a month or a week, and they are never done saying the same word over and over again. And for Trump, that's tariffs. What's the impact on American consumers and the American public generally of Trump's tariff regime as announced?
Right. He's proposed all these ideas that we're going to end the income tax people pay if you're earning $150,000 or less. And instead, what's going to happen, if they even make good on that promise, is it's possible those earners will be paying more in the price increases passed on to consumers by corporations that they're paying to import goods. He's selling this as foreigners are going to pay the price. It's the foreign companies that are giving us a raw deal in international trade that are going to bear this cost burden, which is a complete misunderstanding of what the policy is or how it works. And it's fascinating that, his constituency is distracted by things like transgender rights in America, when they make up about 2 to 3% of the American population, when all of us have to suffer under price increases and inflation. And for some reason, people get so deep into those arguments that they're reading the science and research behind gender surgeries, but for some reason are not digging deep into the impacts of these economic policies, which are just as technical. But for some reason, we've been taught that economics is not a subject for regular people. But it is true that whoever is importing the good is going to pay that tariff, which is a tax to the government. And because they've promised steady returns to Wall Street, they're going to raise prices. They don't want to cut into their profit margins to take on the cost of the tariff. So instead, they're raising prices on all of us to cover that cost. So we are still paying a tax to the government. It's just in a different form. And he sort of sold it as, I'm saving the everyday American, and I'm really getting these foreign bad guys that are the reason we had inflation under Joe Biden. It's really a fairy tale.
Now, Jessica, you have to forgive me for my cynicism on this next point. My reaction to Donald Trump openly threatening his slave, serf ally Denmark with dismemberment and the open theft by force if necessary, he said yesterday. We don't want to use force, but we're not taking force off the table. We must have Greenland, which is a part of the sovereign territory of Denmark. Denmark is the most obeisant slave state in Scandinavia to US empire and has been for decades. It is never done with the mantra, Russia, Russia, Russia. In fact, it's trying to terrify its citizens with Russia, Russia, Russia daily. And yet it is now their own ally, Donald Trump, who is openly threatening to invade their territory and steal it. As Oscar Wilde said of the death scene of Little Nell, Charles Dickens' Little Nell, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to laugh. Well, I'm laughing at the possibility of Trump taking Greenland from Denmark. Is he really going to do it, though?
I don't think so. I think they've been severely humbled this week. There was an article, it was the best headline I've ever read, where they talked about U.S. officials going door to door in Greenland, asking people if they would meet with Usha Vance and J.D. Vance, and they couldn't find anyone. Is there anything more embarrassing than we asked everyone in this country if they would like to hang out with you, and everyone said no? And we said, oh, but it's the first or second lady of the United States and the vice president. And they were still like, absolutely not. I think Donald Trump and his administration have underestimated how people in other countries feel about their own country's status as not being a part of the United States. He did the same thing with Canada. And I think this is a deep embarrassment. And whenever Donald Trump gets embarrassed, he tends to, shake it off. Oh, I never really wanted Greenland anyway. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see that because he's been met with this embarrassment, he's going to change his mind. I don't think he'll use military force for Greenland. I think he would more likely use military force to take Panama.
Yeah, although no need to take Panama now because the Panamanian puppet government there has capitulated and given BlackRock the ownership of the warehouses on the canal that Chinese companies previously did. But Canada is a more interesting apple that's hanging from the tree and coveted by Donald Trump, isn't it? Because it has produced exactly what you said. It has produced a coming together of the Canadian people, Liberals and Conservatives alike, in visceral opposition. In fact, they've even remembered that there's supposed to be a British territory with King Charles is being appealed to come to their aid. God help them if it comes down to that. Is he going to back off on Canada too?
I think he very likely will back off on Canada, and I don't think this is because he's strategic in any way and he's realized that he's galvanized the public of Canada. They're making decisions at the grocery store to turn any label that is a U.S. product away so that people know that that's something to boycott. Just the extensiveness of the organizing against America in these other countries is astonishing. I don't think he's going to say, oh, this isn't worth my time. It's not going to be successful if I try and annex Canada, which is an absurd idea. I think he's going to get bored of it and move on to something else because, like you said, it's a childlike mentality of this is the shiny new toy in the sandbox and I really want it right now. But the attention span is also that of a 5-year-old, and I think he'll move on to something else quite quickly because this isn't going his way.
Let's hope so. Let's hope it's not moving on to a chemistry set or anything that can explode in all our faces. Jessica Burbank, you are indeed a star. And for the audience of the mother of all talk shows, you were born tonight. And I hope it's not long before we see you again. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're asking on the poll, is the US beyond international law? Yes or no. You can vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, and on the YouTube stream. And, well, it's not going all that well for those of you who believe that there's still something called international law. For me, it's just lipstick on the pig that was long ago wiped away. Let me take a quick break. Then first call will be from Julius in Germany on Iran and Rita. I told you, this is the Open University of the Airwaves. Stay tuned. China is the one that is doing what ought to have been done from the start. You and I both know there are some things that are too important to the people, the nation, the country, to be left to the private sector, and there are some things too specialized that are too important to people's ordinary lives to be given over to the state, as I always put it. Have you ever seen anyone happy with a haircut from a state barber, or a suit tailored by a state tailor, or a great meal being served in a state canteen? There are all kinds of things that are better left to the private sector, but there are all kinds of things that are too important to be left to the private sector. And that synthesis of public and private, that mixed economy, that common sense socialism is what we in the Workers' Party of Britain fight for our own country. Every country has the right, of course, to its own path, and Russia has the right to its. I'm only interested in Russia nowadays in as much as Russia is playing the leading role in stopping the spread of American hegemony, stopping the unipolar tyranny of United States rule. Of course, because I love Russia, I particularly want Russia to do well. I want Russians to do well. But what kind of government they have is a matter only for them.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So we're toll-free in the United States and Canada, which at the point of this broadcast are separate countries. It's +1 844 944 3344, and the UK and Ireland, it's free of charge, 0808 196 5522. and the worldwide number 0044 203 966 2625. Julius from Germany has called on Iran and scottritter, and he's the first call of the night. Go ahead, Julius.
Oh, hello, Mr. Galloway. I just wanted to
Welcome.
cast our minds. Yeah, hello. I just wanted us to cast our minds back very quickly to a short history, and then I'll make my point. Right? Most of the time, we tend to think that the war, the pivotal time of the Iraq War, was when Colin Powell was at the UN holding that vial and then showing that they had mobile labs and all that stuff. That has been an important point in history, but what people forget is before that happened, the UN inspectors were already in Iraq doing inspection, claiming that there were no weapons of mass destruction. But more importantly, there were missiles called Al-Samud-2 missiles. People forget this. And these Al-Samud-2 missiles had a wide range, and the UN destroyed those missiles, supposedly as part of the inspection process, right? And eventually, when the U.S. told the UN to leave, that was by Hans Blix and Dr. Mohammed al-Baradei were the one overseeing this. When they were told to leave Iraq, Iraqis basically had no weapons to defend themselves. They had no long-range missiles, so they simply couldn't do it, right? And I think this is where Scott Ritter gets it wrong. If Iran negotiates and capitulates, which is basically what he's kind of intimating, what happens is the U.S. will do it anyway, and when they do it, they will be totally defenseless. It was the same with Muammar al-Gaddafi, and it will be the same with Iran if they do capitulate. That's unfortunate, but that's what's going to happen because the U.S., from the whole NATO negotiation with the Soviet Union when they said, Eine Osterweiterung, that's no eastward expansion, they did expand eastward anyway, they did attack Libya anyway, and when Iraq complied with Scott Ritter, when he dealt with the likes of Ramadani and co, ended up basically destroying all the lethal weapons, the U.S. bombed anyway. So the only way this really works is if the U.S. Iraq actually arms more. I hate to admit it. I really wish that there were nuclear weapons anywhere, but that's the truth of the matter. I'm not really sure whether you agree with me on that front, but that Al-Samud-2 missile thing is something people don't talk about enough. And I wanted to raise that point, George.
Well, you've raised it very eloquently, and I had, as you possibly recall, younger viewers will not, I had some small part to play in the period that you are discussing. I was the person who persuaded Saddam Hussein to allow the weapons inspectors to return. Indeed, he gave me permission to go upstairs. We were in the bowels of the earth, beyond missiles, I presume. It was a very long way down in an elevator. He told me to go back to the surface and announce that he was going to allow the arms inspectors back in. And it has been a matter of sincere heart searching on my part for the role that I played in that, because it haunts me that in allowing the arms inspectors back in, the Iraqis allowed a process to begin, which was completed, which led to their virtually total disarmament. And that therefore, did I play some small part in fooling the Iraqis to disarm themselves, only to be overwhelmed by superior force without any possibility of the defense provided by the weapons that were you described and were destroyed by Blix and al-Baradei, both of whom are still alive, both of whom are still talking, and they don't talk enough, but I saw Blix just the other day talking about the threats against Iran in the same kind of tone that he begged the so-called coalition of the willing not to attack Iraq. Inspections have worked, he said. There are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, he said. Your casus belli, against Iraq is null and void. It's fabricated. It's fake. But they invaded and occupied Iraq anyway. They destroyed not just the Iraqi leadership and its government, but they destroyed Iraq, possibly forever. Now there are multiple Iraqs. There's not just one Iraq, just like there's not just one Libya. Libya has 3 governments, 3, all running in parallel. And we blew the bloody doors off Libya, and look what happened next. So I'm haunted by the subject of your call, and I made my own point of view known in my monologue at the start of the show. If North Korea hasn't been invaded because it does have weapons of mass destruction, and it is definitely not the kind of place that would be afraid to use them. And its leadership are not the kind of people who would say, oh, well, we had them, we thought it would be a deterrent, but it isn't, so let's just walk away now. Everybody knows that's not the kind of place North Korea is. And therefore, North Korea is not and will never be invaded by its enemies. But Iran is supposed to, because of some, I don't know whether you'd call it liberal or whether you would call it theological objection to nuclear weapons, is supposed to leave itself effectively defenseless. Of course, Iran has developed its ballistics technology and its drone technology to such an extraordinary extent that it packs a very powerful punch even with conventional warheads. And it has been furbished with the very best and latest of Russian anti-aircraft, anti-missile weapon systems that will take a terrible toll on anyone who attempts to invade Iran from the sky. And Iran's sheer size and population, 100 million Iranians, who, except for a very tiny handful of English-speaking Iranians around the 5-star hotels in Tehran, the ones the journalists meet, will unite to defend their country. I've said this before, but let me repeat it. Everybody thinks the Iranians are really religious, really, really holy Jews. And of course, millions of them are. But the thing that amazed me when I've been in Iran is just how nationalistic they are. I mean, really, to the point of, well, that's a bit strong. Iranians are extremely nationalistic. As Jessica alluded earlier, Iranian society is 5, 6, 7,000 years old. They had an empire when people like me were living in the forests and painting our faces blue. And the United States of America definitely was a long way, a long, long way, millennia away from having been discovered by Christopher Columbus and founded as the modern Republic of the USA. Thanks, Julius, for the opportunity to dilate on that. Now, you can leave comments on YouTube just by scanning the QR code right now, and if you do, I'll try and read some of them out. Flat Earth Blue says the survey is ambiguous. It should ask if America thinks it's beyond international law. Well, that's a bit pedantic, because if they think they are beyond international law, they are beyond international law. Janice Anderson sends us $9 American, 99 sense. Thank you, Janice. And says the US is not above the law, it's overextended and falling. Criminal decision makers will be held accountable after the fall. Of course, the permanent state will have moved on to the next nation by then. Thank you, Janice. True Blue 21 sends Danish krona. Whoa, I've still got friends in Denmark. After all I've said, sends 45 Danish krona. Trump and MAGA claim to follow Jesus, when they never visit his birthplace or the church in Palestine, yet they always kiss the wall. Makes no sense. As I said before, DKK, Trump's the least convincing Christian conversion since Russell Brand. Jitendra Singh says the leaked war plan story was no accident. It was deliberate, a calculated move, perhaps to signal to the public that they are at war without declaring it outright. And Ram Hasib says the US dictates who can and who cannot have nuclear weapons when they're the only country to use them, not once, but twice. Well said, sir. On the line in England, in Corby, is our old friend Terence on Saudi Arabian complicity. What have you got to say, Tel? Go ahead.
Mr. Galloway, two things. The first thing was of undergraduate students last week. I was doing a social and economic history degree. Doesn't Mr. Galloway say what his party will do on council housing? I mean, we need somebody. When I said I will ask him this question, we need somebody with leadership, because after the Second World War, you obviously had Claire Matley Bevan and Knight Bevan on the other side doing things for this country. Is there any chance that we can have a council house that we can start off or go with our mums and dads and have a planned future? Mr. Galloway is the one who raised about Saudi complicity. You know, I'm a human, be a Roman Catholic, and I believe thou shalt not kill, the sixth commandment. Now, to say he believes it, for Trump to say he's a Christian, for MBS, murdering bloodthirsty sheikh, to say he's a Muslim, it's beyond comprehension. And what you said at the beginning in your monologue was absolutely spot on. I couldn't have said it better myself. I'd like your opinion for the young kids that are listening to you tonight on the council housing thing and studying social history. It's just to commend you on the same thoughts as that myself concerning I'm a Muslim, I'm a Catholic. As you go along, it's money.
Thank you very much, Terence, and bless you and the undergraduates that you are in touch with. I am actually, for the last few years I've been turning down all invitations to speak at universities, basically because you get organized campaigns, whether it's the trans rights campaigners or Israel supporting students and so on. They try to embarrass you at best, stop you speaking at worst, and it's not really worth my while doing that. But I'm always open to persuasion, and I have accepted an invitation from the Cambridge Union to speak there quite soon, and I'll keep you all posted about that. The Workers' Party indeed has a house building program. We're the only party that does. We believe that the best form of tenancy is council house tenancy. We deprecate the proliferation of so-called arm's length housing associations, which are really public bodies. In any case, they depend entirely on public money and money that they borrow, leaving the debt around the neck of the public, but with none of the safeguards that council housing has. We believe in council housing because it's the only method of tenure that allows you to elect your landlord and unelect your landlord if your landlord is falling short. I was born in a slum, as you know, Terry, which was then slum clearance, destroyed the slum tenement buildings in which I was born, sharing an outside toilet with 5 other families. And at the age of 4, coming up 4 or 5, I moved into a brand new council house. And These were brand new, so the issue of repairs beyond snagging and so on were not quite as vibrant as these very same houses would now be. But if you needed a repair done and you went to your councillor who depended on your vote to continue to be a councillor, you could be sure that the public works personnel, which was the in-house repairs and management, which is again by far the best way of doing it. It's the cheapest way of doing it, not subcontracting it out to private companies. Have your own direct works that can build and can repair and maintain. The councillor would make sure that the public works were around pretty damn quick, because the councillor needed you when the elections came to continue to be your landlord. So we have a highly developed program of council house building and for council house management, and I commend any interested in it to consult our website at the Workers' Party. Thank you for the opportunity to say that. Now, a big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the MOATS.tv website. I keep calling it the new website, but it's been up and running now for quite some time. And a very large number of people have now visited it. MOATS.tv is our website. But you can also donate there to the mother of all talk shows. And this week, Luke Derbyshire, Liz Shaw, Carl Sco, Antonia Kostarakis, and Diana Saleh have all given generously to keep this show going on our website, and I'm deeply grateful to all of them. So please become a MOATS donor tonight, at the end of the night, after this show, or even right now. Go to moats.tv and leave whatever you can, even if it's $1, €1, £1, any currency you like. Do what you can, because otherwise you risk, certainly, the Wednesday show. You risk us falling back after now years of 2 shows a week. You risk us falling back to 1. Carl is in Florida and wants to talk about Denmark and scottritter. Let's go to Florida. Why wouldn't you? Carl, what do you want to say?
Yeah, good evening. How are you doing tonight?
All good. By the grace of God, we're good here. What would you like to say?
Thank you for taking my call. I believe you are a good man, and I'm so proud of you. You're speaking the truth, and you're speaking your mind, like President Trump, and also like President Putin. So I believe I watched the speech, and I heard the speech. If you heard it from the President Putin, he said he's going to cooperate with the U.S. about the Greenland, and he's going to help U.S. to get over the Greenland. What is your opinion about that? And also he spoke about the history about the Greenland and USA. Multiple times they mentioned to buy or purchase Greenland, USA. And last Bergen, or before last Bergen, it was between Germany, Denmark, and USA, but USA ignored that by the Congress. And then I believe Denmark, they took over. You have to listen to this speech from President Putin, and you're gonna get your opinion. What do you think? And
yeah,
also,
I did listen to it.
Denmark,
go on.
They are very far, the closest geographic point, according to a lot of geographic people. They talking about it's New York and the mainland of USA, closest point to the Greenland, but not Denmark. And also, by the way, Greenland, it's not European. It's not European Ireland. It's North American. Yeah. And also, I heard about and I read it also. It's the Greenlander. It's not European and not even American or North American. They are Asian originally, to be honest. Yeah. So that's about the Greenland. And I want to say about above the law or beyond the law, USA. I want you to be honest also, but don't get me wrong. Forgive me for my, I don't want to be rude. Also, the Brits or the UK government, if you read the history, they talking about they enslaved more than half of the planet Earth. They slave them and they get all the mineral or all the wealthy from the globe. Even USA, they was under colonialism of the British colonists. And also they foiled them and they burned the White House. I wish if you can make shine light of the one episode for this. And then when they kick them out, then they trying to get some freedom, and even they change I will bring you the website for that next time. I will call you back. They changed the constitution of the U.S. In 18 something like that or before to beneficial for the UK or the British royalty or something like that. I read a lot of conspiracy. I wish if you can shine light if there is no embarrassing for that or for your program. Yeah.
Well, look, you're welcome, and I've given you a long telephone call to excite us with your theories. It was a very helpful history lesson. Geography, not quite so much, and contemporary politics, scarcely at all. I'm glad that you're watching the show, and I'm grateful for the kind remarks that you made. But you're quite wrong in trying to persuade us that President Putin is supporting President Trump taking over Greenland. But you can be forgiven for it because there was a deliberate effort made for ulterior motives to portray Putin as having backed Trump's attempt to grab Greenland. He did nothing of the kind. Not only did I listen to President Putin's speech, I listened to it in Russian as well as the subtitles. So I know for a fact that he did not back Trump over Greenland. He said that the attempt to seize Greenland was a matter of concern to Russia. Not because Greenland is a part of North America, which it definitely is not, but because it was a part of the area of the Arctic, which it definitely is. And the Arctic is a zone of, a region of, an area of vital concern to Russia, and in which Russia is the preeminent power with the nuclear icebreakers and with the extensive scientific and research facilities that Russia has in the Arctic. So Russia's concerned about Trump taking Greenland because it might be a harbinger of an attempt to seek dominance for the United States in the Arctic region. I've already said I don't give a toss about Denmark. I mean, if you knew how little of a toss I give about Denmark, you'd be shocked. I'm only interested in this question to the extent that it demonstrates to slave countries that you will never be slave enough if the United States decides that you are no longer worthy of their protection. This is a lesson which has been learned from Korea to Vietnam to Afghanistan to even Iran itself in the period of the Shah of Persia, who was completely betrayed by his American allies, who once he was no longer of any use to them, was allowed to wander the globe like the Marie Celeste, unable to dock in any US port, unable to get any succor and comfort from the people of the United States government, who had, until the moment that he fell, treated him as if he was their most important ally. So, for me, the lesson for Europe is you will never be able to guarantee that the United States will protect you, or that the United States will not take from you whenever it decides to do so. So the policy of being on your knees in front of the empire doesn't work. So it'd be better to try standing up for a change. Thanks very much, Carl, for that call. Now, the podcast, as you know, I regularly plug, but this week it's definitely worth plugging. We have entered the charts in Russia, Egypt, and Mexico over the last few days, and we remain in the #1 spot in Morocco. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. You can also listen to the podcast via the moats.tv website. And once you've listened, of course, please don't forget to leave a review and rate it also. It helps us to grow the podcast and more people will know about it. Well, 10 minutes later than I should have, let me take a quick break, because after the break is Greg J. Stoker, activist, veteran, host of Colonial Outcast podcast and State of Play on Mint Press News. And he is definitely worth hearing. Quick break, then Greg. Stay tuned.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis. Look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You are that haggis, otherwise known as a haggis pudding, Donald. Greg J. Stoker is a veteran, U.S. military veteran. He's an activist. He's the host of Colonial Outcasts and State of Play on Mint Press News. He is therefore absolutely qualified to be our guest this evening on these great events unfolding. Greg Stoker, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Nice to see you again. The big enchilada, is Trump going to attack Iran? If so, when and with what force, do you think?
Well, we've been watching a pretty big buildup. We've tracked at least 4 to 7 B-2 stealth bombers. They have extended capabilities to drop 3 30,000-pound ground penetrators, you know, which is obviously meant to collapse caves in Afghanistan. That's where they were first developed for. And now the theory is for nuclear hard sites underground in Iran. They're staging out of diegogarcia Air Base, which is out in the Indian Ocean, because a lot of our Arab allies, where we have bases in the Gulf and Qatar, they've said specifically they do not want us to use their airspace for strikes on Iran. So it's conveniently out there. It's always been a staging ground for operations in the Persian Gulf. So we're watching that build up. But you know what's interesting, George? We just had the Senate Intelligence Committee on Global Threats, which is something we have every year here in America at the beginning of each new year. And Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, said categorically during the global threat assessment that there is no evidence that Iran is currently trying to develop a nuclear weapon. They kind of stopped all their ambitions with that regard in 2003. So we're watching this man, Trump, who was platformed as this anti-war candidate, become just a straight bomb Iran neocon. And there's a lot of reasons for it. One of them being, isolating Iran, separating them from China. He wants to use this opportunity to implement a pan-Arab Abraham Accords. So for the audience that was just tracking, last administration, he pushed for the Abraham Accords, which was the normalization between Bahrain and the UAE and Israel. Well, he's kind of definitely signaled that he wants to do that for the entire Middle East and Gulf region, and separating Iran from that region is part of his massive foreign policy initiative.
Yeah, because the demand is not only on the nuclear file. Some people are missing that point. The demand is far more far-reaching. It is a demand that Iran cease to have any hinterland in the Arab world, have any allies in the Arab world, cut itself off from the Arab world, because Trump knows that Iran has millions of supporters, often co-religionists, but not always, who will reject the Abraham Accords. And if Iran is still around to help them, their opposition to the Abraham Accords will be that much more vibrant. So it's not just the nuclear question, although that's what the media usually focuses on. It is an attempt to force Iran to destroy its ballistic missile capability, its ability to fight back against distant enemies, and to, as I say, end its role supporting people like the Ansar Allah in Yemen, like the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, like the resistance in Palestine. He's really going for the whole shebang. The question is, and I appreciate you can't know, neither can I, but the question is he fully appraised of what the likely impact outcome might be if he does go to war with Iran?
Well, first of all, I'd like to add one more thing in terms of the conceptualizing the geopolitical situation around this. It's not just about separating Iran from the Arab world and the Abraham Accords. There's also a concern with isolating China, right? The BRI, China's Belt and Road Initiative, their massive global infrastructure plan. Iran is very important for that. The U.S. in the West has a competing global infrastructure plan. It's not global, it's regional. It's called the IMEC corridor. India through the Middle East, through the port of Haifa into Europe. It's decades behind the Belt and Road Initiative. So that's also part of this, destabilizing Iran, regime change in Iran. The interesting thing about U.S. foreign policy when it comes to Iran, it really hasn't changed. So if you guys want if the audience wants a point of reference, you can Google The Path to Persia. It's a 2009 position paper on how to implement regime change, affect a siege or a war or a limited war in Iran, put forth by the Brookings Institute. And what we're seeing right now is just a posture, a buildup based off of these old think tank pieces that have been floating around Washington since the early 2000s. So does Trump understand what would a war with Iran entail? Probably. I don't think he's that completely incompetent. First of all, Iran, very difficult geography. There's deserts, there's mountainous regions, which would be hell to deal with in terms of a counterinsurgency perspective. The population's 5 times that of Iraq, and Iraq was pretty easy terrain. We controlled the airspace. There's actually no way we could militarily control Iran, because then you'd have to set up a security force, which would basically entail like half of the U.S. armed forces just to implement a new regime, quote unquote, nation building operations. So the most we could do is strike hard sites, and then Iran will retaliate. They can overwhelm U.S. air defenses on U.S. bases in Iraq, in Qatar, all through the Gulf region. There's literally nothing we can do to stop them. And to the extent you mentioned the popular mobilization units in Iraq, well, Pete Hegseth recently called, and this was reported in Iraqi media, the president of Iraq, and said, we will strike targets in Iraq if any of the PMU retaliate against U.S. bases based off our bombing of Yemen and a hostility towards Iran. So we're kind of prepping for this, I don't know, kind of annihilation situation where we can bomb Iran, our bases will get X'd out. So this is kind of why I, who still hold to sanity, think that this hopefully will just fizzle out, because there's nothing to be militarily achieved by striking Iran. We can't invade them. We can't destroy their nuclear program, which, according to our own director of national intelligence, does not exist in terms of a weapons manufacturing platform. So I don't know, what are we doing here? We're just doubling down on late stage mask off imperialism, and it's not going to end well for the U.S. The U.S. military is already stretched thin while having a massive budget. There's a massive recruiting crisis. Again, people don't want to be invested in foreign wars and go to die overseas like we did for the past 20 years. It's just this intractable situation. And from the imperial perspective, it seems like the entire system's in cascade failure. We still have a lot of inertia behind us, which is why we can put billions of dollars of air assets in a base out of like diegogarcia and move a couple of carrier groups into the region. But again, there's nothing we can accomplish that's achievable. It's actually insanity. So.
Well,
but we're going to keep doing it.
I think that's, I mean, I've read the book, The Art of the Deal, and I'm watching Trump now as he browbeats people around the world into giving way to his demands, or rather what his demands really are, as opposed to what they are on the top line. So, for example, he basically threatened to invade Panama, and now he got his way in Panama. China no longer owns the warehouses by the side of the Panama Canal, which is all they ever controlled. They never controlled the canal, as Trump lied. But now BlackRock does control the canal. So he got his way there. He may well get his way with Canada without having to invade it and enlist King Charles into the war of national defense, which the Canadians seem pretty committed to conducting if he does. He's not going to invade Canada. And our last guest certainly believed that he's not going to invade Greenland either. So these are all just art of the deal performances by Donald Trump, aren't they? They are extreme belligerence. They are crazy Trump behavior, in the hope that some part of what it is he's looking for falls into his lap for the fear of avoiding something worse. Is that possibly what's going on?
Well, I try to resist sensationalism. I remember last year I invested a lot of time in trying to dispel this fear or this mania around National Guard units deploying to Syria. They thought it signaled an escalation of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And if you actually looked at the deployment orders, it's like, no, they were just rotating out from the counter-ISIS operations in Syria out of a legal basis, of course, but it wasn't an escalation of forces. So when we look at this buildup, in the Persian Gulf and the moving of another carrier group into the region, which is a significant strike package in terms of capabilities. This is not unprecedented. The U.S. masses forces to isolate and to deter different regional adversaries, as we would call them. So the same thing happened with a similar complement in 2022 out of Australia in order to deter China over the Strait of Taiwan. So I'm looking at this, and yes, the rhetoric, the strike packages and the capabilities are alarming, but I think it's going to be more, as you said, art of the deal. This is basically just a show of force because sanctions aren't working against Iran. It hasn't worked out. The Iranian government has its own problems, but they said they're not going to negotiate a new nuclear deal under these terms. So what do? More posturing. And I just don't think the American people are ready for a direct conflict with another sovereign power. Bombing the Houthis, fine. Sending money to Israel to bomb Gaza, Lebanon, annex the West Bank, and occupy Syria, fine. But the actual commitment of U.S. forces against, another sovereign nation, the consent hasn't been built yet. They're trying, but it's just not there.
Greg, you're a star. Greg J. Stoker, activist, veteran, host of Colonial Outcasts and State of Play on Mint Press. Thanks for joining us here on the mother of all talk shows. Let's take a quick break. Then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri's social media roundup, and you won't want to miss that. Stay tuned. Big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm really going to make this point as firmly as I can. Every one of you has to go to MOATS.tv and donate something, even if it is £1, even if it is $1, €1. Nothing comes for free. 2 shows a week cannot be produced for free. We need every person watching to donate at least £1, $1, €1. I can't put it more clearly than that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, one of the most educated and most interesting Americans abroad is Donald in Copenhagen. He wants to talk about the US and Denmark. Donald, it's your good luck or bad luck to be the Yank in Copenhagen at this moment in time. How does it feel?
Well, George, at my age, I'm comfortable with it. And, the thing about living here in Denmark, I mean, we experience a very, very high economic standard here. And one of the reasons I'd like to bring light on this Greenland possession and, United States taking possession of Greenland for whatever could be negotiated, and I guarantee there will be a negotiation, not necessarily any military conflict. Denmark, under Fogh Rasmussen 2 years ago, he negotiated with the United States on the coalition of the willing and this and that. And he said that he could not tamper with our economic, with our social system here, but he could provide some troops, and he also could provide transportation. And to provide the troops and to cooperate, the United States gave Denmark Maersk, this Maersk Lines, whose transports, if not all, then the majority of the United States military equipment worldwide. So therein lies the leverage that the United States has economically to deal with the prospect of Denmark or United States taking over a portion of Greenland because it's economic.
they could say, okay, well, we'll just stop allowing you to transport, and transportation is quite a bit of our economic standard here. So we have to take that into reality. And a few other things that are, of course, I could go on and on about the Iran and Israel and the genocide and what we're looking at here and pretending that it's not. But to reference this gentleman, Greg, talking about the American people are totally in the dark about what's going on in the real world, because as Donald Trump was told in his previous administration about Greenland, he could have never found it on a map. But the CIA and the Pentagon and these people in the defense industry told him how strategically important that was. And that's how it came to him, to be aware of Greenland. And in particular, you mentioned it also, and the Arctic Circle, and that's where it is. And they would like to somehow impede the progress that China and Russia is making in transporting goods across the Arctic Circle and being less dependent upon the Panama Canal. Those are things to take into consideration. I hope it all works out fine and peaceful, and we can negotiate and cooperate economically with each other. And the last thing I want to mention is, in the United States, people are constantly on this idea that Putin is a dictator, which is like a bad word. Well, let me put it like this. Putin is no Kim Jong-un. I mean, it's not a dictatorship like North Korea or something like that. And however we cooperate with this dynasty in Saudi Arabia, they've been there all my life, and that's dictatorial. However, the difference in the dictators are that Putin is representing the will of his people and the betterment and the protection of Russia. That makes a difference in what a dictator or a democracy has to do with. When you have a democracy like in the United States, it's just devastating itself. Infrastructure is terrible. You can't drink the water, you can't breathe the air, and you can't eat the food. I mean, what are we talking about here? What do we have for the rest of the world? Some of what we have in America? No, thank you very much. But anyway, that's about all it. But anyway, we'll see how it works out with in Denmark. I mean,
you say that's about it, but it was the whole case, Donald. I could almost taste Danish water and eat Danish food. I remember first being exposed to the Danish kitchen in Glasgow. A woman now deceased, a big political woman called Janie Buchan, took me to the Danish kitchen in Glasgow near the city centre. It was the first time I had ever tasted Danish coffee, or even seen, never mind tasted, a Danish pastry. It changed my life. God rest her soul, Janie Buchan. She knew about coffee and Danish pastries. Thank you, Donald, in Copenhagen. A big shout out to tonight's top donor. Listen to this. A huge thanks to Mem Ferda, who has been extremely generous after he came on last Wednesday's show to talk about the protests in Turkey. You may recall we had an interesting exchange on Turkey. Well, Mem Ferda turns out to be the poet and writer Mem Ferda, whose book is the #1 bestseller in Amazon's new releases. There it is there. There it is there. A collection of poems by Mem Ferda. He didn't tell us who he was. He's a best-selling author, writer, and poet. It's definitely worth a read, I'm told, and I'm definitely going to read it. It's on its way to me now. Happy Agony. It's garnered critical acclaim, and it is the #1 bestseller on Amazon in hot new releases. British and Irish poetry and love poems. Well, we love you, Mem, for your extraordinarily generous donation. You can check out the book at happyagony.com to find out more about his books. Thank you indeed, sir. I'll be forever grateful to you. Daniel in Los Angeles wants to talk about Trump. Why don't we go to LA? Daniel, what do you want to say, sir?
Hello, Mr. Galloway. We spoke about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. I just felt like calling in. I caught your show all live here working today on Sunday, but I thought I'd just call in. And one of the things I wanted to
You're welcome.
Broach Thank you, sir. One of the things I wanted to broach the subject on was how the evangelical aspect of the United States, of which is a large part, throughout Europe, obviously the Catholic Church has a large presence, but here in the United States, evangelicals kind of rule the roost. Although there is certainly quite a few Christians who are turning back to the old, the older ways, the traditional Latin Mass and things, returning to tradition. But I, having grown up in a family of evangelicals and having always enjoyed reading history, it's given me pause when I see the things going on, particularly within Gaza, Israel, Syria, etc., and how the United States has played such a large part in those ongoing issues, mostly to make things for the worse. That's my opinion, but I think that many people would agree that without the aid of the United States, and now with the Trump administration part 2, Israel would not belong for the world as a nation, whether it be for their internal struggles, of which are many. They're I think on the precipice when it comes to potentially civil war. They have major internal issues, and none of those things are spoken about here in the United States, because if instability is being shown with what we call our greatest ally, I think many people would say, well, why are we even considering them an ally? And granted, even in my own case, with my own parents, of whom I love very much, they have no understanding of the realities of what is going on within a place like Gaza or within a place like Syria. Most Americans, unfortunately, do not know much about history, even our own, and how certain infiltrators have come into the government, both within the United States, but also Canada and much of Europe, and really do control things now. And I think a lot of Americans are starting to wonder about who controls our government, because when they see how the current administration bends over backwards and does absolutely everything, excuse my metaphor here, to suck the dick of certain people, I think it's quite evident that an American first policy is very much lipstick on a pig, I guess you could say. And I'm speaking as somebody who's voted for Trump 3 times now, simply because I saw him as a way to buy time for another movement to potentially come up and actually represent the American people. My mother.
Well, look, I understand that very well, Daniel, and I would never seek to reproach you for that. Indeed, I myself was glad, I'm still glad that Trump is the president rather than Kamala Harris, though the gap is closing, I think. So there's no reproach from me in the fact that you voted for Trump 3 times. Neither do I differ from you in my analysis of where this is coming from. But I am interested, and I'd like your view, please. I am interested on just how significant evangelical Zionism, Christian Zionism, is in the making of American policy. Because, I only joke, but I mean it. Donald Trump is nobody's idea of a Christian, never mind an evangelical Christian. Donald Trump is a party guy. He's a good time guy. If it moves, he'll nail it. If it, you get my drift. I don't need, during these hours of, while children are still up, to labor the point. But you get my point, I'm sure. Donald Trump posing as an evangelical Christian is not a convincing sight. He'd sooner grab them by the you-know-what than get down on his knees and pray. He's the least convincing evangelical Christian since the Reverend Jimmy Swaggart, as older listeners, older viewers will grasp. Daniel, how big is the influence of evangelical Christian Zionism in the United States?
Well, I would say that in large part and in total, I would say that it's absolutely crucial to the continuation of the Zionist state of Israel, because and any hegemony they might have over other countries around the world. And the primary reason for that being is that the United States is the predominant military power still within the world. Russia is obviously coming up quickly. China has, increasing numbers, but we still rule the roost, I guess you could say. And I think that's, evident with how Europe is, I would believe, quite afraid of the United States removing itself from NATO regarding things, with such as like Ukraine or other things. Donald Trump wants to leave a legacy. He's even spoken about he hopes he can eventually get the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, I'm sorry, but my own personal view is that if you want to get the Nobel Peace Prize, you should not be getting the Nobel Peace Prize. It should be awarded to you by somebody else because they have seen greatness for something you are doing because it's the right thing to do, rather than trying to get this extra check mark on the list of check marks in life that you can attain. But I believe, going back to your question, that Christian Zionism is actually more influential in the long-term goals of international Zionism, and it is key to not just the overall success, but the financial withstanding of the continued assaults from the non-Christian, non-Judaic traditions that they claim to say are partners. But if you look at their secret texts, they're obviously not. But most people don't look that deeply into things. And I think that's one of the reasons why they want to keep people in the dark, particularly within the United States and the Christian West, is that when you look at the people who are at the top, who are really pulling the strings with things, they don't believe in God. And that's even within the Christian church. I think many people, sadly, within the evangelical, Christian churches at the very top, some of those largest pastors, the one thing they talk about is money. Their God is not in heaven. Yeah. Their God is the money in your wallet. And that's why they're always harping about, you need to send us more money, so we can reach more souls, so we can pull more money out of their wallet. But that's my personal philosophy on things, and it's
been very, very interesting, about Daniel, talking to you, and I hope we get to talk again soon. It was an important call. Now, some more comments. Damascus sends $5 says Americans today have no culture of education. They only have entertainment, violent, unabated Hollywood entertainment, excusing the murder of millions. And Luis Garcia says scottritter talks about accepting reality. Reality is that the Iranian people will not, I repeat, will not bow down to sinister monsters because they have dignity. Sparky sends $5 Thank you. Keep in mind, Israel has killed many more Americans than Iran. Remember the USS Liberty, indeed. And Antidote says Greenland belongs to the Inuit, not the USA, not Denmark. And Sami Baye says, Happy Mother's Day to the mother of all talk shows. I wish I'd thought of that, Sami. Thank you very much indeed for that lovely message. Simon, the legend, formerly from Florida, now weaponized news on Trump, Putin, and Yemen. Go ahead, Simon, what have you got for us?
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. There's no doubt many of them will be celebrating Eid today and tomorrow. But as Sammy has just made the point, then I guess we should also take note of many members of the British Commonwealth celebrating Mother's Day, but I'll come back to that in a roundabout way. Well, it occurred to me on this, my 89th call with you, that the only odd couple who seem to be communicating more than you and I apparently are Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor of America, and Mr. Jeffrey Goldberg, has publicly come out.
He's never met him, doesn't know him.
Revealed that he has indeed been speaking to him by telephone many, many, many times before. So Mr. Waltz apparently is looking very much like Frank Spencer, who will, of course, you will recall, failed to navigate even the most simple of daily tasks as a newlywed and new father during the comedy series, the punchline of which I'll deliver at the end. And so I think he's got a bit of a competition, though, since there now appear to be many members of the Trump cabinet who do appear to be auditioning for that redo, as Hollywood tends to repeat shows many, many times again. But if people are looking for the source of the punchline, they can search on Wikipedia for the series that played from 1973 to 1978, because I'm sure that many of those individuals' mothers, whether they've been greeted with flowers on the correct day or not, because as America likes to invent its own weights and measures, they did, of course, reinvent Mother's Day, and they have a different day from Britain. But
really? I didn't know that.
The punchline that I've been rather roundabout in getting too much like Ronnie Corbett is, of course, the show Some Mothers Do Have 'Em. And obviously the audience may like to look that up. They will find a great deal of parallels
memory.
That and the way some of the cabinet members are behaving, particularly with their proclamation that Signal is a secure means of communication, as it is subsequently turned out that the US government has actually leased a software from the Israelis specifically to hack Signal. So not only did they know that they were lying, but they were paying for the ability to be able to hack people's otherwise thought to be secure communications. And one wonders, much like Hillary Clinton's infamous server, how much secrets have been revealed to their adversaries through some rather clumsy tradecraft. But with that, sir, I salute you and your good wife on Mother's Day. Greetings to your children, and I will look forward to speaking to you for the 90th time anon.
God bless you. And we'll have a party when we get to 100, God willing. Thank you, Simon from Weaponized News. I do indeed, alas, recall Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, and Frank Spencer, only too well. And Mike Waltz is, as you say, only the latest auditioning for a role in the remake. Now, you know that on Tuesday nights, I have a different show, another show, one in which the audience is actually visually participating on the video wall. Here's how you can be one of them. Have it out with Galloway. Watch this. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Be on the studio wall. Participate in the debate about the greatest issues of our time. This is the place where we tackle the world's biggest problems and offer some of the world's best answers. You can have your say. Write to me at our website at haveitoutwithgalloway.com and join me here in the studio audience.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is the US beyond international law? That was the question posed by our poll this evening. 22,550 people have voted. So far, actually voting goes on beyond the show on some of the portals, and it is overwhelming that people say the US is beyond international law. We've got one more call that I'm waiting to put through from Gunther in Florida. We've been a couple of times to Florida already this evening, and why wouldn't we on this bitterly cold evening? Gunther is on the line in Florida for the last call of the evening. I suspect, though, there may be one that we can squeeze in later. Gunther, welcome, sir. What do you want to say?
Hi. First of all, I'm a big fan of Simon. I know him from Weaponized News. The other thing is the mainstream media in the United States covers nothing. How the media remains totally silent on Donald Trump and his complicit in the vaccine murder and death of untold millions of people is beyond me. Completely buried. This is very upsetting to me. I don't know how people worship Trump, what they think he is. I mean, listen, Biden was a catastrophe, but I think my criticism is the media in general. Nobody talks about this anymore, and yet people are suffering, and they will continue to suffer. And that's really pretty much my point, George. You got a great show. Thanks a lot.
Well, you've made it very powerfully and very clearly. I think, though, the answer was implicit in the question. People dig Donald Trump because he's not Joe Biden. They worship him, as you say, because he's not Kamala Harris. And they read into him that which they wish that he will be, even if he wasn't last time. Now, I give him a pass because the first term of Donald Trump was completely wrecked by the deep state conspiracy around Russia. He couldn't get his head up. He couldn't get his feet properly under the table. And I've been there a much lesser level than Donald Trump. When I was first elected to the British Parliament almost 40 years ago, my first term was wrecked in exactly the same way, holed below the waterline. I was lucky to stay afloat at all, let alone achieve and do the things that I was otherwise capable of being, and that those who hold me below the waterline feared that I would be capable of doing. So I have some fellow feeling for Trump in that regard. His, of course, a vastly greater and more powerful position than mine ever was. But I know what happened to Trump. He was delegitimized as a result of the deep state conspiracy against him, because him defeating Hillary Clinton was not on their bingo cards. They did not expect Donald Trump even to be the nominee, never mind to be the victorious candidate in 2016. And the sense of entitlement of the creatures of the swamp, of which Hillary Clinton was then the preeminent alligator, they didn't expect it, they didn't accept it, and they seized the opportunity to hobble, if not to cut the legs entirely from the Donald Trump first term as president. But the second term, he doesn't have that excuse anymore. He doesn't have the excuse that John Bolton is wrecking his foreign policy anymore. And if he has picked people to surround him that are just as bad as John Bolton, that are just as deep in the swamp as Mike Waltz appears to be, and certainly his friend Mr. Goldberg, whose number just got sucked in. Just sucked in. Didn't know him, never met him, never called him. Well, Mr. Goldberg and Mr. Waltz do indeed turn out to be very close indeed. And so if Trump has surrounded himself with that kind of person, then he only has himself now to blame for any failures of his second term. Gunther in Florida, thanks very much. I'd let you back in, but my good wife is in the studio with the social media news roundup. What's happening, Gayatri? Happy Mother's Day, by the way. Though it turns out it's only Mother's Day in Britain.
Fair enough.
America have got their own Mother's Day.
To me, every day is Mother's Day.
They reinvented everything else.
They do.
Every day is Mother's Day.
Every day is Mother's Day to me. So, and I reminded the kids of that accordingly. And for me as well, happy Eid al-Fitr Mubarak to all our Muslim audience today and tomorrow. Let me start off with a witty email that I got in on the back of your commentary on council housing and why it's such an important point for the Workers' Party. Tony Gatcliffe says, I moved into a council flat in 1990 and the service provided by the local depot that did repairs was first class. I only had to click my fingers and they were round. It was only 3 or 4 years past before I found out that I shared the same surname with the then deputy mayor, who is no relation, and the depot guys thought I was him.
Very good. It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good.
It shouldn't be that way, but it is witty. So the poll is asking, is the US beyond international law? Well, yes, majority answers. Tim in Brazil says, international law is currently a contradiction in terms. Unfortunately, we still live in cowboy country. And that comment reminded me of the Many Now series that we've been watching about how America was set up, basically.
What was that called?
Primeval, for example, God's Country. Many of them. There's so many of them nowadays.
Jamestown.
And Jamestown, that was kind
brutal,
of
actually.
Yeah, it was. But
you understand how America is as it is today when you watch these slightly alternative westerns. You know that the Clint Eastwood one, Unforgiven, was another in that genre of showing the absolute ugliness of the settler subjugation of the native population, the impact on their society, never mind on the victims of the bringing of millions of slaves from Africa, and how that changed the lives of everybody, mostly the slaves, but also the society that they lived amongst. It's very profound.
Yeah, so cowboy country then, cowboy country now. And this is actually very apt to what Jeffrey Sachs said. He said, when I look at my own country, the US, it is a semi-democratic, white-dominated, hierarchical, racist society that aims to preserve privileges by the elites. That's how it was formed in 1787. It was a slave-owning, genocidal country killing Native Americans for a white culture. The most violent country in the world since 1950 has been the United States. And he said this at quite a prolific platform in which he was stopped. It was very profound.
Right, yeah, the mic was cut.
Yeah. So,
no wonder if that's what he said.
Exactly. So, and then Ali A says, America is only acting this way because the rest of the world allows it to. A bully is only a bully until someone gives it a bloody nose. The world should sanction and boycott America and hold it to account. And James Lenihan says, beyond international law, the US Congress voted to have the military invade The Hague. Yeah, remind you that? If the ICC indicted any American or any American allies for war crimes. So yes, this is true. The Hague in the Netherlands, where I was born, would be invaded by the US if this would be happening. And speaking of the Netherlands, last month they refused entry to UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. And then last week, the government actually announced that they would not be in favor of re-electing her. So they're making it very clear that, what is international law if not the UN? Francesca Albanese kind of represents that, right? But unfortunately, she has been a bit too precise in her rapporteuring of Gaza. So the Dutch have voiced their opposition towards her re-election as special rapporteur. So that's international law for you.
Well, look, I'm hesitating to interrupt you because I was criticized last week by a well-wisher who said that I should let you finish your sentences. She's obviously not a married woman, or she'd know that people who are married finish each other's sentences all the time. But I take your point, so I've been watching my P's and Q's. But on that subject, Gayatri, the United States is international law because the United States has the power to stop international law from being applied. And it has done so most spectacularly, though not exclusively, on the issue of Gaza. If you can have an ICC, if you can have an ICJ, but it cannot implement its verdicts because the United States veto on the Security Council of the United Nations will render these peregrinations of these international legal institutes null and void. They are inapplicable. So that's why, I've got to confess that I was of this view long before now. I opposed the setting up of the ICC precisely because I knew it would end this way. That only Africans and Serbians would ever be tried in front of it.
And now also Asians.
And now we've got Duterte.
Duterte, but only, of course, if you oppose U.S. Army in your country.
And he was betrayed by his own, I mean, that's a weird story, that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I've got a special guest on it, so we'll get into that.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. Well, I don't want to finish your sentence, so have you got anything else you'd like to say?
Well, Ben Johnson says, talking about Iran's morale keeps them from having nuclear weapons. But you can't have morals in the face of those devoid of them. As Winston Churchill said, you cannot play by drawing room rules when facing someone who only desire is to destroy the drawing room.
Powerful.
Yeah.
That do?
Yeah.
Chips later?
Let's go.
I mean, it is Mother's Day, after all. Last call is from David in Manchester on Jeremy Corbyn. Yes, David, go ahead. What do you want to say?
Evening, George. Mother Earth, Mother Tongue, Mother of all talk shows. I think that says it all about mothers. Yeah, what I'd like to ask you, George, forgive me eloquence, but I know what I know, and I've been a student of yours for the last 15 years. But I recently went to see Jeremy Corbyn, and do you think he was the last hope with the state of Britain now for Britain? And I know that people were begging. I went to see him in the Mechanics Institute in Manchester, and people were begging him to form a new party. And I don't think he will. But do you think one day he will regret that he didn't? And I know you did. You put out a plea to him on your show.
Yeah, I mean that's a deep and important question, at least for us in Britain. It's becoming less of an important question with every day that goes by, because if Jeremy had left in 2019 when he was overthrown, then he would have left with a very large number of people, hundreds of thousands of people. And he would have been he would have been 6 years younger than he is now. I mean, I'm 70, he's 77, I think. So years matter when you get to our age. I know that that's young for American politics, but it's old for British politics. The opportunity was lost. The reason for leaving was very clear then, it's less clear now. The numbers would have been greater, and Jeremy's vivacity would have been that much more powerful. Now, 6 years on, the continued failure to lead a breakaway, to launch something new, is, I think, quite debilitating. And I think that the hour has passed for Jeremy, and will soon pass for me. And a new generation of people will have to begin again. And it's a great pity. It's a case of what might have been. And say that not as a reproach to him, as much as condemnation of those who betrayed him. Those who betrayed him were the obvious suspects, the people who now run the Labour Party, and the people who had run it before Jeremy's very brief period of leadership, but also the enemy within. He was very poorly served from within. He had the wrong people and listened to the wrong advice from them. And on a political, I'm not talking about staff, by the way, some of whom were, and even some of whom still are, friends of mine. I'm talking about his political, elected members of parliament around him, were very poorly chosen indeed. And though they have so far gotten off scot-free because no book has yet been published that really knows what went on in the Corbyn inner circle, one day that book will come. And I hope that that book will pull no punches and that it will expose those very close to Corbyn whose perfidy whose betrayal brought the house down, surely more effectively than the enemy without. The enemy within is almost always the more important enemy. God love him, Jeremy Corbyn came very close. He came within, I think, around 3,000 votes only of being Prime Minister of Britain. I think that though he would have done some really important things on issues like homelessness, for example, issues like this week's issue of kicking disabled people for the sake of filling the so-called black hole, which isn't there in any case, kicking the walking sticks, kicking over the wheelchairs of disabled people in Britain, a totally despicable series of acts. Jeremy would never have done any of these things. He would not have acted in the way that the British government today acts in the face of the genocide going on in Gaza. Far from it. Jeremy's life's work, in a way, could, if you had to boil it down to one thing, it would have been his fidelity to the Palestinian cause. So in that regard, Jeremy Corbyn, Prime Minister, would have been a very different Prime Minister indeed. But I don't think he would have lasted. I don't think it would have lasted for long. It would already have been over because the Labour Party would have ensured that it was over long before now. You cannot just stick a good guy at the head of a parliamentary army of deeply rotten individuals. They would probably have burst his tires on his bicycle on his way to the palace to become Prime Minister. Because Jeremy wouldn't have travelled in a limousine, he would almost certainly have cycled there. He's that sort of guy. They would definitely have brought his government down at the first opportunity to do so. We had dual power in the Labour Party at that time. Jeremy was the overwhelming choice. Well, not overwhelming, but the choice of about 60% of the Labour Party's membership, which was then very large. But there was always 40% against him. But 60 is good, and he was their choice. But the MPs, who are the day-to-day, if you like, the day-to-day cadre that the leader has to lead, were completely against him. 90%, maybe 99% against him. So it wouldn't have lasted. So it wouldn't have changed for long everything. But it would definitely have made a difference. It would definitely have been a huge step forward, which, though reversed, would have been a benchmark, a beachhead that could have been built upon. But there is no profit in waiting for Godot, no profit in waiting for Jeremy Corbyn. As you said, he's not going to form a new party, and even if he did, the people with whom he would be forming it would not be capable of taking us much further forward. We, on the other hand, in the Workers' Party of Britain, scored the biggest vote of any socialist party in the history of the United Kingdom last July. 210,000 votes. Indeed, no party like us has ever got half that number of votes before. And we did it in the teeth of a complete blackout on the media, in the debates, in the opinion polls. The only place you could find us was in the bookmakers' odds, because they knew better than the pundits appeared to just how strong we were in certain areas. We didn't win any parliamentary seats, including my own, but we came second in a group of places that we will come first in next time. And other independents also came very close. But we came within 500 votes of winning against Jess Phillips, the hated Harridan in Birmingham. We came within 1,200, 1,300 votes of winning in several other places, including my own. And we're about to show in the parliamentary by-election in Runcorn, and even more in the council by-election in Rochdale on the 1st of May, just how important a force for the future the Workers' Party of Britain will be. I urge you, David, to stop going to Jeremy Corbyn shows, come to ours instead. Thanks very much indeed. Everyone who called this evening, our excellent guests, and all those who participated in the poll, now nearly 25,000 of you. So, from Gayatri and from me, we are very happy that you were here tonight, and we hope that if you didn't celebrate Eid today, that you celebrate it happily tomorrow. Eid Mubarak to each and every one of you. Thanks for joining us. See you on Wednesday, same time, same place. I keep mixing up my Wednesdays.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.